So today we're going to look at driving irons. So we've got several of the major brands. We're going to look at performance-wise, test with the same shaft, but actually look at a few data points. What are the key data points and which ones do what within those? So in terms of ball speed and spin and things, what are you really looking for from the driving iron? But ultimately also just give a bit of a personal opinion on some of the playing characteristics and which ones we like the most. So there'll be some answers on forgiveness, feel and looks, as well as some of those data points. So follow me and let's check out these driving irons. So because we're testing 6 of these heads out, we've done a little bit of data already, and I'm going to go in, hit each club. We're using the same shaft, same loft, just across the 6 different heads. I'll talk a little bit about the feel, the looks, what the experience is like hitting them, maybe mention the odd data point, but then we'll go through all the numbers afterwards and look at which one's best for certain criteria, which we'll fill you in on later on. So starting with the T250U, this one of the neater head shapes. Certainly Titleist have kept a really thin top line to this, so if you're someone who's affected by you're wanting to see a bit more club head for a bit more forgiveness, you might want to give this one a miss because it's actually quite a neat club head. It's one of the things, it kind of looks like the old 712U, so kind of an older school version of the Titleist head, but yeah, not a lot to look at, but a very clean, neat head. Still, even though it doesn't have the plastic in the back they used to in the 200, still got a little bit of click to it. That's the hollow nature, that's the tungsten in the heel and the toe, but actually got a nice bit of pop off the face. It's not a harsh sound. It's got a little bit of toned down nature to it, but out the middle, nice strong shot there, but it's not the lowest spin head, this one. So as far as driving iron goes, hitting a piercing flight, the launch doesn't pop up, but like that last shot, 3-3 on spin, it's not an absolute low bullet, but quite solid because it's not as big as some of the other heads. The mass is a bit closer to the contact point. Feels like you've got a bit more guts behind the ball. You're very reliable for flight. So slight fade there, so spun up a touch more, but really consistent spin pattern there. I'll get one straighter one, then we'll move on to the next head. But certainly a head that if you like a neater shape, if you want to look a bit more like, if you play more like a blade style iron, you want the head to blend off the set well. Nice neat shape, solid feel. Definitely going to suit your eye if you like that kind of head. So moving up to the U505, this is the bigger bodied version of the 250U, you might say. Certainly structure, it's a little bit different in terms of what it's designed to do. In principle, helps with a bit of launch, but our previous testing and what I've seen in the bay is this is a bit lower spin, but definitely has a lot more clubhead to look at. A much wider body at the bottom, wider sole, got that little, got a little bit of camber to it, so it doesn't stick in the ground, but much more clubhead to look at down behind the ball. So from a confidence point of view, that can give players quite a lot of confidence knowing they've got a lot more to hit it with. But it does make that feedback a little bit more hollow as well, which hollow body, hollow feel, you might say that's obvious. Some brands will find out later on, use a bit of an infill to change that sound. Titleist have got the connector on the back of the head to the face from the back to kind of just to manage the speed of the face a little bit, but that also affects the sound. So if you want as much feedback as possible, the other Titleist, so the 250U, is going to give you more of that. But as a head to get away with as much as possible, U505, that was a pretty rotten strike, but I didn't feel it as much. And I think that's something that actually is quite an important one. You're using this club generally as either a go-to off the tee, something to put in play, or as a flat bullet ball flight. If you play links golf, for example, you want that nice, low, strong ball flight, but you want something that lets you get away with a little bit. So really, it's a nice sound off the face, not too harsh. You get a little bit less feedback for contact, but it definitely feels like it stays with the hit a little bit better. Now that last one was a bit heely, so that's dropped a load of ball speed down. I'll do one more of that just to give it a representative contact, because that was a bit of a miss, but it doesn't feel like the head kicks anywhere near as much as the 250U, which, say, some players will like the feedback, some won't. But I definitely know that one came off the face fast. So the good hits, it was a real fizz off the face. A little bit of a flatter flight. That one's drawn a bit, but the spin's down under 2,700 revs. So noticeably a 300 or 400 revs lower than the other Titleist head. So a bit of a difference in ball flight, very different feel. So now moving into the TaylorMade, the P UDI. So this is the smaller of the two, the more driving iron. Not using the DHY because that's that little bit more hybrid-like for this particular test, because we want the more powerful flight. And so you're getting the 2-iron lofting it, just to not have too many heads to use, just using this one, because this has always been their kind of stronger flighted head, the UDI series, the driving iron series, rather than the hybrid series. Back to a kind of a moderate sized head. Certainly the satin finish changes the visuals a little bit. It looks a bit more compact again, having just swung the U505. But actually the satin finish I quite like. I think it looks quite nice and neat behind the ball. And certainly always been quite a strong playing head for TaylorMade, this. I mean, definitely has a bit of punch coming off the face. This is more forgiving than I remember it being, I think, rather than I thought it would be. I think the smaller head profile, I think now where there's the ability to put weight down the bottom, it actually collects the ball. It almost feels like a slightly bigger head in the way it picks the ball off the turf. I think a lot of players might look at the overall scale of a head and go, it's quite small, but actually the amount of tech and tungsten they can put in, the thinner faces to spread the weight around, you actually get quite a playable head, really quite user-friendly. So it can actually, a smaller head shape can actually belie how playable it is. And this has definitely got a bit of, bit of giddy up and a bit of go, forward flight, which is what we'd expect from this head. Something TaylorMade had done this series for an awfully long time, and it's been pretty successful over the years. But they managed to get the note of the head right this year. It's definitely a little less harsh, a little less clicky. That one's just smothered a little bit, but it's not an objectionable sound, which some of them in the past have been, where they've added in bits of different materials in the back, and the real kind of they're really toning and tuning the heads better now than they used to. They all, whilst there are slight differences, they all so far have sounded quite nice. I think that's really key to extending off the irons, where through all of the hollow body structures, they've improved the note off the head. That's really important for feedback, but definitely more playable than it looks for sure. So now moving to the Srixon head. Now, current world number one uses a previous iteration of this head. The Srixon driving irons have always been very popular. I've used them for a number of years. Previous models, because of that softness, the forged frame and that infill just kind of softened and toned down. I've always liked that feel. Now, this has got, again, a bit more tungsten. It's got a little bit more hollow body. They've got a thinner face to it for a little bit more ball speed. So it's less soft than they used to be, and it's back to being a slightly bigger head. The depth of the sole there is that little wider. They flatten the top line to show it all to you. So we're back to looking at a slightly bigger club head. Completely different finish, more of a mirrored finish than the TaylorMade that we just had. But that V sole, just helping turf interaction, they've got that on the driving iron as well, something that Srixon have made their signature piece over the years. A little bit more of a higher pitch sort of T note off the face, but that one came out, I got on top of that a little bit more, so turn the flight down there, but that's come out nice and forwards. So you've got a head that's a little bit bigger, visually. Again, some might say confidence inspiring, some might say ugly. That's all in the personal preference side of things. But I think for a lot of players, having just a little bit more club head's not the worst thing in the world at this club. Some forged body to the head, which tones some of that sound down a little bit. Quite a forgiving club head. So certainly as an all-around head, Srixon have been known for their iron quality over the years. So this head's been, for us in the fitting bay, particularly popular because of that overall feel with ball speed side of things to it. And there's that kind of characteristic kind of snap off the face that when you actually get a ball before turf, like that shot was, not the shot before, it's a sort of a bit of a signature note that this head gives. It's a little bit more of a pop. Nice strong flight, definitely not quite as high a launch as some of the others, but always been a good model for them. Definitely good option now as well. So now going to the Protoconcept head, so more of a niche Japanese brand, not as mainstream, but for more of a kind of the purist side of things, the the forging a little bit softer. I'm expecting this to have a bit more feel to it. It's a little bit more of a compact head, certainly heel to toe, slightly shorter, but it's still got relatively thick top line. So hollow bodied like all of these heads are. It's got some interesting kind of thick, thin elements to the face from a ball speed point of view, flight side of things, keeping speed low on the face, but noticeably shorter heel to toe than the other heads. And that will, some players might find that a little bit visually intimidating, but it's a more the purist side of things. And noticeably a different note. All the other heads have got a little bit more of a higher pitch, so clickier, slightly harder note. Even the Srixon, it's got the slightly tingier note, but the forging in this, the amount of the body of the head that is forged and the tone and the feedback they're trying to get is very much all about feel. Yes, ball speed's important with one of these heads, but if you're going to this head, it's because you're prioritizing the feel element to it. That real kind of forged quality that you'd play for example, a kind of a bladed Japanese forged head for. This is going to blend feel-wise a little bit more with that. They're all going to have that bit of pop to it, but it's slightly more muted down. It's slightly less harsh. But actually, again, relative to how it looks with that shortness of heel to toe, actually still pretty playable, surprisingly forgiving, especially when we're doing this in sequence. We've got some of the bigger, more forgiving heads that we're hitting today as well. Now, this really doesn't feel as unforgiving proportionally as it looks when you're looking at purely the scale of the head. So yes, you're going to be paying more for this because of the nature of the forging versus some of the other models, but Japanese tend to do things pretty well when it comes to that. And from a feel and a performance point of view, that's right up there. So going from that Protoconcept to the Ping IDI. Now we're going almost from one end of the scale to the other in terms of this is a little bit bigger. It is a cast frame. It has got that different material on the back. This has its own airbag, as we joke. It's got its own, effectively airbag on the inside to support the face. Allows them to go thinner on the face, but it's supported with as little weight as possible. So this is going to feel pretty different. It's a much bigger head to look at. The depth, on the sole is much wider. But Ping, say, engineering-wise, it's quite a feat to actually get all that within one frame of head. Very different sound off the face, much more of a click, especially coming straight off the back of the Protoconcept. But you've got a scale to the head that you don't get from any of the others. It's a slightly more squared off toe, so it has quite a particular look to it, which not everyone's going to like. Certainly, if you're looking for a pretty looking head, this probably wouldn't be the one you'd go to. But in terms of margin of error, there's an awful lot in here that makes it pretty darn forgiving, and that was a real slap. So lost a bit of ball speed, but it stayed really straight. So as a head, maybe not the prettiest creature in the world, but bit low on the face, but that's still got good ball speed. Didn't flare the spin too much, 3-2, only dropped a little bit of ball speed, but you've got an awful lot of club head there to pick the ball up from. And so if you use it off the ground as well as off a tee, this is giving you loads of weight in the sole, lots of margin of error, really kind of going for speed off the face, but basically a lot of club head to get away with. When you're catching out in the middle like the last one, it's got a real get up and go to it. That's some fast ball speed, slightly quicker swing with that, but that's a punchy going ball flight. Lower spin on that shot in particular, down 2.5. That's got some fizz to it. So let's just look through all the numbers, give you a roundup. So just going to pick out a few of the data points. Obviously, don't need to run through all of them, but from a driving iron in particular, there are a few real keys. Now, one of them is going to be ball speed. So I'm going to use smash factor in this instance because there's marginal fluctuations on club speed, which I don't want to cloud the ball speed data. So if I sort based on smash factor highest through lowest, what we can see here, 147, 147, 147, 147, scroll down, 146 and 146, they're all really similar. And what this does say, they're all doing a really good job of ball speed. No matter what brand, they're all using thinner faces. They're all using thick, thin face technology to optimize strike at a certain point. They're all using a bit of extra weight down the sole of the club. they're all doing a good job for ball speed. You know, there's only so much you can do with the face thickness, and actually this is a little more even than I expected it to be. I thought we might see one that would just stand out a little bit more, like both in a good or a bad way. But actually, they're all really good, and ultimately the ball speed fluctuations, the fastest ball speed, which in here is the U505, is only because it's the quickest club speed by 0.2 of a mile an hour. So actually, ball speed wise, you're not going to lose out with any of them on a solid hit. So that's actually kind of lesson number one from this. There isn't one that's that much faster than the others because it's basically physically unachievable, otherwise one of them would be doing it. So what else do we want from a driving arm? Well, we want a low spin, we want a going ball flight. So if we sort based on spin, low to high. So lowest spin head here, ZXRU, which, you know, low to high, 2,605, higher spin with the T250U, 3,294. So we've got around a 700 revolution variation in terms of spin. Now launch angle wise, 10.7 launch, up to 12.2. So some of that is that pitch of flight, the launch angle going up as well, which is a little bit head style. Bear in mind we've got these all at exactly the same loft. So we haven't, you know, cheated any of this. Angle of attack's basically 2 degrees down with each one. So there are some slight variations based on how that club head's getting into the bottom of the ball and interacting with it to give flight. Now the 250U is a little bit more measured, shall we say, than the 505. The 505, you know, in principle should launch just as high, if not higher, but it is lower spin. You know, that's actually kind of pretty much in the middle of the pack, but it's still about 300 revs lower spin than the 250U. So, you know, that spin differential, and bear in mind, this is for me, you might find slightly different results, but pattern-wise, the Srixon is a strong spin rate. You know, I actually use that head. I use it on links courses or as a driving iron in summer. And one thing I did notice versus the previous model, it is noticeably that bit flatter, and that is what we're seeing here. Second to this, PUDI. Again, TaylorMade always been very strong for spin, but that sits right on that stronger end in terms of pitcher ball flight, you know, lower launch as well. So, you know, from a spin point of view, Srixon doing the best job there, but about a 700 rev differential. So that is quite noticeable because we're looking at about 30 odd, 27% there. So quite a big difference between the different heads. The other bit, distance. So if I sort high to low on distance, now again, there is a slight caveat to there are some slight ball speed differentials here. But what we tend to see here is, you know, the lower spin ones are at the longer end of things. And then at the bottom end, higher spin ones, T250U, surprise, surprise, that little bit shorter. But, you know, considering there's a, you know, ball speed 132.4 up to 133.8, we're looking at a mile an hour and a half. Technically, that's about 2 or 3 yards. 232, longest 226, 6 yards top to bottom. So it's that spin differential which is making the noticeable, if you'd call 6 yards noticeable, the difference in terms of run out distance, because outside of that, you know, lower launch will carry a bit less, higher launch will carry a little bit more, but it's the spin rate which really is going to dictate how far that runs out and the total yardage. But seeing as it's a driving iron, that's still a big factor in what we're looking at. And again, height-wise, you know, that's the only other factor. This again, this is going to, you know, correlate, generally speaking, pretty much with the spin numbers. Lowest flight being the Srixon at 55 feet, highest flight being the T250U, 75 feet. So, you know, the key markers for a driving iron of ball speed, not a lot of difference. Spin rate, Srixon doing best. You know, distance, you know, it was just the UDI and the U505 hitting the top notes for distance. So, but they're quite tightly packed. I think what we do see is a couple of degrees difference in launch angle, and we've got that 700 rev difference in spin. So those are the really key factors that you're going to look at and say, right, does a head suit or not? But then also that forgiveness bit. So I'm going to provide a bit of a ranking for club heads around 3 or 4 that are going to pick out the best, in my opinion, based on some of the data and some just my own personal preference. So now a little bit of sort of more personal ranking of the data we've covered. So that covers off the facts. This is more a bit of, you know, which ones do I like most? So from a looks point of view, I've played a blade style club for a long time. I like the neater, cleaner head shapes. The T250U, for me, just visually neatest, cleanest shape, nice thin top line, just a beautiful looking head, really simple. But the PUDI actually matches, I like that satin finish, and again, slightly neater head shape. So for me, I think they're the nicest looking, but the Titleist just edges it. Feel-wise, Well, it can only be the Protoconcept. That's that soft forged frame, that slightly dampened down, softer tone to it. I just think from a feedback and a feel point of view, as well as actually a nice balance to hit with as well from a strike standpoint, I think that trumps all of them. And just that really nice sort of soft buttery feel relative to the head style just wins out for me. Forgiveness, got to be the Ping. That IDI. Not a pretty creature in my eyes, but actually across the face, just feels like the head doesn't twist, doesn't move. It feels like you just get away with an awful lot. The U505 is a very, very close call to it though. But from an all-around forgiveness point of view, the Ping, it's what they've always done so well, but it's just a great head for that. And then if I was going to take an all-around, so take into account performance, looks, feel, user-friendliness, probably just edge it towards the Srixon. It's one that I use, and that's not the reason why I'm picking it, but I think it just ticks an awful lot of boxes. You've got a really strong flight, you've got a little bit of extra kind of scale of club head that can visually give a lot of people a bit more to their eye to look at. You know, the forged framing keeps the tone and the sound nice and soft. You get a bit of pop of ball speed off of it, and say they've simplified the looks a little bit. You know, that mirrored back means it's a little less obvious as well. So I think as an all-around from a ball speed, flight, forgiveness, feel point of view, that one to me just nicks it. But I think the UDI outperforms what it looks like, and I think that's a real kind of interesting one. You know, don't necessarily, you don't go to that head thinking it's unforgiving because it's small. The performance is pretty good. So hope you've liked that video. I hope it gives a bit of insight to the driving irons and actually how far the techs come and how evenly spread that tech is across the heads. They're actually really good performance from all of those models. Really quite impressed with the consistency of performance there. So if you've liked this, like, subscribe, check out all the other videos. We'll do others on all the new product coming out. You know, back end of the year into the new year, there's going to be a lot more coming. And hopefully see you next time. Thanks for watching.